The morning Emma Hartley vanished, the October fog had rolled across Ashford College's ivy-covered campus like a funeral shroud. She had been last seen leaving the library at 9:47 p.m., her backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds trailing white cords against her navy peacoat. Security footage captured her walking toward the south parking lot, then nothing. Just empty frames of asphalt glistening under halogen lights. Within 48 hours, Emma's face blazed across every news channel in the state. 18 years old, bright, beautiful, disappeared without a trace. Her parents, Michael and Susan Hartley, appeared at press conferences with hollow eyes and trembling hands, begging anyone with information to come forward. The university administration promised full cooperation. Students held candlelight vigils. The community searched wooded areas and drainage ditches. But then, the investigators found the texts. Emma had been secretly dating Marcus Chen, a 23-year-old tattoo artist from the rough side of town. Her parents had forbidden the relationship, calling Marcus inappropriate and dangerous. The texts between Emma and Marcus painted a picture of young rebellion, plans to run away together, dreams of starting fresh somewhere her family couldn't control her, declarations of desperate love. Detective Sarah Reeves, lead investigator on the case, felt the narrative shift beneath her feet. This wasn't an abduction. This was a runaway situation, a tale as old as Romeo and Juliet. The press coverage changed overnight. Sympathy curdled into judgment. "Spoiled college girl runs off with bad boy," the headlines sneered. Resources were quietly redirected to cases deemed more urgent. Emma's file grew thinner, colder. Michael and Susan Hartley refused to accept it. They hired private investigators, mortgaged their home, appeared on talk shows. But as months passed with no contact from Emma, even they began to fracture under the weight of uncertainty and public scorn. Then, 7 months after Emma disappeared, a jogger found Marcus Chen's body in a ravine 15 miles from campus. He'd been dead approximately 3 weeks. Cause of death? Heroin overdose. Though Marcus had no history of drug use. His phone was missing. His apartment had been ransacked. Suddenly, the case twisted again, dark and serpentine. If Marcus was dead, where was Emma? Detective Reeves reopened the investigation with renewed urgency, but the trail had gone ice cold. No witnesses, no evidence, no body. Emma Hartley became a ghost story, one of those unsolved mysteries that haunted late-night true crime forums. What no one knew was that Emma had never left Ashford at all. Professor David Brennan had taught Victorian literature at Ashford College for 14 years. Students praised his passionate lectures and kind demeanor. He volunteered at the animal shelter, brought cookies to faculty meetings, and lived in a modest craftsman-style home 3 blocks from campus. His wife had died of cancer 8 years prior. He wore his grief with quiet dignity. Everyone liked David Brennan. But beneath that carefully constructed facade lived something monstrous. He'd first noticed Emma in his British poetry seminar that fall. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. Her laugh, bright and unself-conscious. He began finding reasons to speak with her after class, recommended books, offered mentorship. His interest calcified into obsession. He followed her movements, learned her schedule, imagined elaborate scenarios where she would see him not as a professor, but as a man worthy of her affection. When he discovered her relationship with Marcus, jealousy consumed him like wildfire. The night Emma disappeared, Professor Brennan had been waiting in the parking lot. He'd tampered with her car earlier that day, ensuring it wouldn't start. When she approached, frustrated and alone, he'd offered a ride. She'd accepted, trusting. The chloroform-soaked cloth came out before she could scream. He'd prepared the basement weeks in advance: soundproofed walls, reinforced door, a small cot, a chemical toilet, a chain bolted to the concrete floor. He told himself it wasn't kidnapping, it was protection. He was saving her from Marcus, from her own poor judgment. Eventually, she would understand. Eventually, she would love him. Emma had fought at first. She'd screamed until her throat bled, hurled herself against the walls, refused food. But Professor Brennan was patient. He visited her every evening after campus emptied, bringing meals and speaking to her in that same calm, professorial tone. He read her poetry. He explained endlessly that this was for her own good. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The small basement window, set high near the ceiling, showed only a rectangle of sky. Emma learned the pattern of seasons by that window: fall's gray clouds, winter's early darkness, spring's lengthening light. She marked time by counting the meals he brought, by the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. She tried to keep her mind intact by reciting everything she could remember: poems from his class, song lyrics, mathematical formulas. She exercised when the chain allowed. She planned escape attempts that never materialized. The isolation gnawed at her sanity like rats at grain. Professor Brennan disposed of Marcus himself, a carefully staged overdose in a location far enough away to avoid suspicion. With Marcus gone, the investigation stalled. No one was looking for Emma anymore. Not really. She existed 15 feet below the sidewalk where students walked to class every day, invisible and forgotten. 3 years passed. July 4th arrived with the breathless heat typical of summer in the Midwest. The neighborhood around Professor Brennan's house filled with families preparing for backyard barbecues and evening fireworks. Tommy Nguyen, age 9, was playing soccer with his older brother in their front yard when a particularly enthusiastic kick sent the ball sailing over the fence into the professor's property. "I'll get it," Tommy shouted, already running. The professor's yard looked empty, the house dark. Tommy squeezed through a gap in the fence and spotted his ball near the back corner, resting against the foundation. As he retrieved it, something caught his eye. A small window, half hidden behind overgrown bushes, its glass grimy with years of neglect. Curiosity drew him closer. He knelt in the dirt and peered inside. The basement was dim, lit only by a weak overhead bulb. At first, Tommy couldn't process what he was seeing. A thin figure lay on a cot, barely moving. Long matted hair, visible bruises on pale skin. A chain running from an ankle to a bolt in the wall. The figure's eyes opened, locked with Tommy's. They were the eyes of someone who had forgotten what hope looked like. Tommy ran. "Dad! Dad!" His screams brought his father, David Nguyen Sr., running. "There's a lady in chains in the basement. She's hurt." David Sr. called 911 immediately, his hands shaking as he tried to extract coherent details from his terrified son. Within 6 minutes, 2 patrol cars screamed to a stop outside Professor Brennan's house. Officers Morrison and Chen approached with weapons drawn. The front door stood locked. Morrison radioed for backup, while Chen circled to the back. Through the basement window, Chen saw what Tommy had seen, and his blood turned to ice. "We've got a victim, alive, basement level, requires immediate medical." They breached the door. The house smelled of old books and decay. They found the basement entrance behind a locked door in the kitchen. Morrison kicked it open, and they descended into Emma Hartley's tomb. She lay motionless, watching them with eyes that had seen too much. She was gaunt, weighing perhaps 90 pounds, her hair a tangled mess past her waist. The chain around her ankle had worn a permanent groove in her skin. When Morrison approached, she flinched. "Emma? Emma Hartley?"
Morrison's voice cracked. "It's okay. You're safe now. We're police. We're taking you home."
She began to cry, silent, shuddering sobs that shook her entire frame. Professor Brennan had installed a security camera system 2 years into Emma's captivity, paranoid about discovery. He was at his campus office, preparing notes for the fall semester, when his phone pinged with a motion alert. He pulled up the feed and watched police cars surrounding his house, officers moving toward his front door. Terror and rage flooded through him in equal measure. They were taking her after everything he'd done, all his careful planning. They were stealing her from him. He abandoned his office, grabbed his go-bag from his car trunk. He'd always known this day might come, and sped toward the interstate. He'd get to Canada, disappear, start over. But first, he needed gas. Detective Reeves had been one of the first calls made from the scene. She'd immediately issued a BBOLO for Professor Brennan and contacted the FBI. Every gas station within 50 miles received his photo. A clerk at a Shell station on Route 34 recognized him immediately. "That's the guy from the news," she whispered to her manager. "The professor who—" Police vehicles boxed in his sedan before he'd finished pumping. Professor Brennan stood frozen, his hands still on the nozzle, watching his reflection in the police cruiser's windshield. The man staring back at him looked old, defeated, nothing like the composed academic he'd pretended to be. Detective Reeves approached slowly. "David Brennan, you're under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and murder." He didn't resist. As they cuffed him, all he said was, "She was supposed to love me. I gave her everything."
Emma spent 4 weeks in the hospital recovering from malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, and infected wounds. The psychological recovery would take far longer, but surrounded by her parents, by therapists who understood trauma, by investigators who finally listened to her story, she began the slow process of reclaiming her life. Professor Brennan was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life without parole. The trial revealed the depths of his obsession: journals filled with fantasies, thousands of photographs taken without Emma's knowledge, the methodical planning of Marcus's murder. 5 years later, Emma Hartley stood before a classroom of law enforcement officials, teaching a seminar on long-term captivity cases. She'd earned her degree in criminal psychology and dedicated her life to helping solve cold cases, particularly missing persons. She worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, consulted on investigations, and spoke at conferences. The chain scar remained visible on her ankle. Some nights, she still woke from dreams of that basement. But she'd learned to carry her survival as strength rather than shame. "Every case matters," she told the officers assembled before her. "Every missing person is someone's daughter, someone's son. They're counting on us not to give up. I know, because I was counting too. For 3 years, I counted every single day. And on day 1096, a 9-year-old boy with a soccer ball gave me back my life." We can't save everyone, but we can make sure they're not forgotten. We can keep looking. That's what I'm asking you to do. Never stop looking. The room erupted in applause, but Emma was already thinking about the next case file on her desk, the next family waiting for answers, the next person still counting days in the dark.